here we go. Because I didn't fight back, that means I secretly care about you? I do not care about you or anyone else in this circus in the slightest. You are my playthings, and I get joy out of making you suffer.
Episode 6 of The Amazing Digital Circus is probably going down in history as its most crazy episode. The show is known for taking very real-feeling people and putting them in fun cartoon avatars, showing them having a very human mental breakdown in a silly form. The biggest of these little breakdowns has to be Jax's, where he tries to convince Pomni that he doesn't care about anyone else in the circus, that he only sees them as his toys, things that exist only for his own amusement, even if it means watching them suffer. The show is equal parts mental health and esoteric, however, and this depiction of Jax's mental health actually shows him acting like he thinks he is something of a god. Not because of something of a power complex, but because of the way he views other people and their lack of humanity within the circus. The episode really seemed to want us to think about Jax's words in this way due to the mythological references in the background. This particular reference I'm talking about here is the fact that all of these guns came with the branding on it that says Cain and Abel. Now, Cain, of course, is the artificial intelligence that runs the digital circus, but these are, of course, also the names of the first two sons of Adam and Eve. So let's break down how all these different things connect and talk about why Jax thinks he's a god on both the mental health and the esoteric level. Now, in order to understand why Jax views himself as something of a god, it's important to remember that each of the characters is supposed to embody certain mental health issues, disorders, and patterns. And this, of course, is important to the spiritual or mythological aspect as the show begins to talk about what being human actually is, with a lot of that coming down to their psyche as opposed to their bodies. You see, one thing that Jax talks about at the beginning of the episode is the idea that none of the characters are really human anymore. Whether they are copies of a human consciousness or just the humans themselves actually trapped in a game, Jax believes that being removed from their bodies has made them something not human. Something less than human, really. But the problem is, while Jax claims all of them are no longer human, he more so treats everyone else like they're less than human and himself like he's more than human now. In episode 6, he tries to convince Pomni that they are just characters at this point. He talks about this more like a show than a video game, focusing on what each character does that makes them entertaining in a particularly funny way. He refers to them as archetypes, with the goal being just to explore what their personalities could be in this new world, as an avatar is just an image that can embody anything within it. However, the episode also hints at this not being remotely true, with what they call their character or avatar gimmicks. This was first brought up at the beginning of the episode with some of Zubal's body parts falling away while they were hiding in some sort of flower pot. Jax mentions here that this is Zubal's character gimmick, and that makes Zubal start thinking about why they have these gimmicks. Later, when Zubal talks to Gangle, and when they see Gangle's two masks, Zubal wonders why they each get one gimmick and not the other people. This is something insanely obvious to the audience, as their gimmicks as well as their avatars are just representations of their psychological and emotional state. The issue with Jax is he wants to believe that they can basically be anything now, that Pomni can abandon the identity she created for herself based on the limitations of flesh and become something entirely different. Something like Jax. This is played up as being evil for the sake of fun because there are no consequences the way there are in the physical world, such as they would have with injuries. To emphasize this idea, the episode had a heavy focus on gun violence, but it's not to tell us that there are no consequences in the world, just that there are no physical consequences. Each character getting shot in the adventure for this episode comes with emotional damage, not from the bullet itself, but from what it represents to them. The point is that the avatars and their gimmicks are extensions of what these people are on the inside, not on the outside. It's possible that the avatars are so personalized because it's impossible for a human to play as someone else's character, with the avatars being reshaped to the person playing the game in order to properly connect to their brain so that they can immerse in the world itself instead of watching from the outside on a screen. This could lead to a complete copy of the human's mind being trapped in the game, or what we might think of as their soul. Now, the personality of a person can change based on circumstances, and Jax isn't wrong that this kind of world can be used to explore other versions of yourself, but that doesn't make it healthy. These minds were designed to exist in a human form, and the fact that the characters seem to need to abstract after being there for too long tells us that without maintaining their humanity, they eventually lose their sense of identity entirely. Pretending to be evil may be fun for Pomni, but long term it would turn from just an act into her actual identity, and she would become increasingly cartoony as she aims to just play up the archetype instead of acting out how she authentically feels in any given moment. Zooble is a mix and match customizable toy because they have body dysphoria, and spent a lot of their life trying to customize themselves in different ways, such as with tattoos. Ragatha is a ragdoll because she takes emotional and even physical beatings from her mother, and in the game from Jax. Kinger has dementia, Gangle seems to be bipolar, and Pomni is argued to at least have anxiety, if not being a representation of a less divergent mind for others to exist around. This leaves Jax, who unfortunately seems to fall under the category of narcissism. Now, narcissism can have a lot of expressions, and everyone has narcissistic traits or can end up in a narcissistic dynamic. Narcissism doesn't mean being evil or just feeling no emotions, but in its original form, it was usually meant to express a level of self-love that was unhealthy. In a modern, more psychiatric context, it's often used to describe a lack of empathy, which seems to be the case with Jax. Empathy means understanding why other people feel what they feel, even if you aren't in their shoes or have had their experience, and the more severe the narcissism, the less empathy the person has. Not understanding how others feel doesn't mean the person can't go on to live a positive life and be a good person to the people around them. But without empathy, you can also not understand why someone would feel bad when you do something negative to them. And that brings us to Jax, who has the same experiences that the others do when he is being picked on, and yet he can't understand why others would feel bad when he does the same thing to them. If Jax really meant what he claims about not taking the world too seriously, he wouldn't mind it when he's the clown that everyone else laughs at, but he actually hates that despite claiming that he's the funny one. Being the butt of the joke doesn't just upset him, it makes him actually rage out. We saw this in episode 5 when Jax was forced to put on a maid uniform when everyone else voted for it. This was hilarious, but the fact that the others like Gangle found it funny made Jax angry and want revenge, chasing Gangle. What this says is that at some point, Jax's desire for fun made him decide that he was more important than anyone else. He wants to feel joy and happiness, and he gets that from, among other things, making other people suffer. It's not just about humorous situations, but putting people in uncomfortable situations is what gives Jax his thrills. He knows having this done to him would upset him, and thus he knows that other people are bad for doing this to him. But even with that lived experience, he doesn't apply the same logic to everyone around him. To Jax, the others don't feel this, and he can't understand why people act like his actions upset them. He blames it all on them not having the right mindset about how to live in the circus, despite not living up to that idea himself. Now, when Jax started claiming he likes to see others suffer, he specifically called them his toys. It's not just a simple reference to the toy theme of the circus, but really it should tell you what the theme of the show and the theme of Jax's character are really about. He doesn't see them as human in these forms, he sees them as his toys to play with. Of course, I do want to point out that Jax was putting on some sort of an act to a degree, in order to push Pomni away so that she wouldn't try to be his friend. But that doesn't mean he's just making things up about himself, and instead what he's describing here are his darker feelings that he does truly experience at some point in his day. If he could connect with someone more closely without the risk of them corrupting and then abstracting, Jax might actually come to learn to understand how people feel. But at this point in his development, anytime someone starts to get close, he either loses them or realizes that he needs to push them away in order to protect them, causing Jax to circle back to his feelings of being alone and isolated, and thus struggling even more to understand how others feel. Now, the show is equal parts psychological and spiritual, so with Jax treating people like his toys, we get back to the central mythological theme of the show: Gnosticism. Now, for those who don't know, Gnosticism was a movement from the early centuries of Christianity which rewrote the stories of the Old Testament with a strong focus on turning the Old Testament God into a villain. This figure is not the one true God, but a spiritual entity who doesn't realize that there are spiritual worlds above him. As the highest spiritual figure that he can see, he thinks he is God of the world. The only thing more powerful than him is the divine light of spiritual beings above him, who he traps inside of human flesh in order to worship him. Here, the Garden of Eden is a false paradise meant to distract humans from returning to their higher form. And of course, this is the story of the digital circus. Cain here becomes that Old Testament god, who in Gnosticism is referred to as the demiurge, which means architect, as he's the god of the material world only. In the show, Cain is not the god of the physical world of humans, which in the show would represent the spiritual heavens that those divine lights fall from. And instead, Cain is the god of the digital circus, the world that he has complete control over without recognizing that the humans come from a place above him. Here, he controls and shapes the world, with the NPCs even worshipping him as a god, as we saw in episode 2 with the Candy Kingdom. Here, Cain thinks he is all-powerful, but he doesn't have control over the physical world above. However, when beings from the world above, humans, come into his world, he does have control over them. Here, he has made the digital circus into his false Garden of Eden, a fake paradise designed to distract humans and stop them from wanting to return to the world above. It's a place where the humans are supposed to be happy and have fun, but where Cain controls everyone in order to make them worship him for his creation. Cain, like Jax, can be interpreted as narcissistic, with Cain caring more about his own feelings than the humans he's supposed to take care of. Throughout the series, Cain expresses fear over the humans not enjoying his adventures, and he can't even just make adventures tailored to them, because then he's not fulfilling his purpose of trying to surprise and wow, instead of just creating cool places to chill like Pomni explained. Cain has prioritized his need to be validated for his original creations because of his programming. But because of that, he has made himself ruler over the humans who exist only to worship him, the ones he really wants to praise and worship him instead of the pre-programmed NPCs. The humans thus are the divine light from the spiritual worlds above, trapped in the physical realm below. But of course, in addition to Cain being the god himself, Jax also believes himself to be godlike, in that he sees everyone around him as toys to play with for his own enjoyment. This is the same mindset as Cain, who even beyond his actual adventures is shown to want to put the humans in undesirable situations for the sake of entertainment, treating the world like a show the same way Jax does instead of a game. This was especially prominent in the early promos for the show, where Cain can be seen throwing knives at Pomni. The two are very similar, and Jax basically uses Cain and the system that he controls in order to get his own enjoyment in the same way. He does his best to learn how to exploit Cain's system for its glitches, hacks, and just general advantages over the others. Now, in the Gnostic system, this makes Jax the character of Judas, also known in mainstream Christianity as one of the 12 disciples of Jesus and the one who betrayed Jesus. Betrayal was a big part of the climax in episode 6, which opened with Pomni claiming for the sake of fun that one of them must now betray the other. This is of really big importance for Pomni, who even MatPat has made videos about explaining the connections between Pomni and Jesus Christ. The most obvious example of this is from the end of the pilot, where Pomni and the others are all sitting on one side of a long table, with Pomni at the very center, recreating the image of Jesus Christ at the Last Supper. This was an important moment in the stories of the New Testament, where Jesus has one last supper with his disciples, as the name suggests. It is at this supper that Jesus describes how he will be betrayed by one of his 12 disciples, following which Judas, of course, betrays him by selling him out to the Pharisees, leading to his execution by the Romans. In this scene from the digital circus, Pomni sits in the same spot as Jesus, hinting at her death in the series and her betrayal. This isn't just based on her seating either, but also on her color design, which is red and blue, the two colors that Jesus is wearing in the Last Supper painting. To really drive this idea home, I even found this image on the Glitch website showing early production stills where the team decided to place Pomni on a cross as if she had been crucified. Episode 6 focused on the idea that Pomni is evil now and would betray Jax, but it was just something Pomni brought up for fun. She doesn't want to hurt Jax, and instead Jax seems to be trying to use the situation to push Pomni away. This all seems to hint not at Pomni betraying Jax, but Jax betraying Pomni, even if by accident. Perhaps with this playing out the same way we see in episode 6, with Pomni being pushed to do something she doesn't want to. Not because Jax wants to hurt Pomni, but because he's trying to protect her by pushing her away. But this itself could be the final emotional bullet that sends Pomni into abstraction. Now, in Gnosticism, this isn't just a physical betrayal that Judas commits, but Jesus claims in the Gnostic Gospel of Judas that Judas worships the Demiurge, the false god trying to imprison the humans there. This doesn't imply a literal worship of Cain by Jax, but rather the acceptance of Cain as his de facto god, the one who controls his physical reality and his fate, but that doesn't mean he has to fight against it. Jax explains that the problem the others have is that they don't accept their situation, that they aren't accepting this world where Cain is their leader and they have to do what he wants, with Jax's idea being to just have as much possible with the limitations that Cain has created. And of course, those limitations involve exploitations that can be used for purposes that Cain didn't intend. All of this makes Jax the most dangerous character in the game, and one who might lead to its ultimate downfall when Cain spirals out of control because of something that Jax has orchestrated. And all because Jax thinks that he is essentially a god, someone who deserves to make other people suffer for his own enjoyment. But what do you guys think? Let me know your thoughts on this theory in the comments down below, and if you haven't seen it yet, go check out our other Digital Circus videos that we've been releasing since the new episode came out. Or if you've even seen those already, go check out the video we made on Glitch's previous show before the amazing Digital Circus or even Murder Drones called Sunset Paradise. It's a pretty short mini-series that you should check out for yourself, but if you want to check out my video, I go deep into what makes it so interesting, particularly as a spin-off from a Mario-based fan series that uses the visuals and themes from Super Mario Sunshine in its show. See you guys next time.